And the Tiger, we'll get to that a little later on. Armen Keteyian, of course, Jeff Benedict, tremendous job on the new Tiger Woods book. It's gotten phenomenal reviews. This thing is running off the bookshelves. Came out last Tuesday. And I'll tell you, you're not going to get them both in studio at 5 o'clock on a Monday of Masters Week is a give them credit. They didn't have to do that, so they give us a deal. We're going to start a little differently because I don't want to be too negative. We're going to start with what makes Tiger great. Jeff, you're going to handle it, and then I'll go to Armen in a minute. I'm going to use the 2008 U.S. Open because that is the tournament that is Tiger. Competitiveness, guts, ability, staring down an opponent. It was his last major, too, which also fits. But to me, if I had to come up with, I want to show my kids 40 years from now, Dad, Tiger Woods, give me something. I'm going to show them those 4 days at Torrey Pines and see how he got through that and beat Mediate in the playoff on the Monday. Start there. Go ahead.
He's the toughest, physically toughest competitor that I've ever watched in sports, and he's the toughest mentally. When you combine his mental acuity and his ability to block things out, to deal with adversity, and focus on the task at hand, plus the physical toughness of him to play through injury, to play through pain. It's the kind of thing you typically associate with football players or with boxers and stuff. He's a golfer, for Pete's sakes, and that's the kind of approach that he brings to a game that the game had never seen before, and you saw it all in that Masters. I think that the training for that, Chris, part of that's innate. I mean, he was born with some gifts. There's no question about it. But when you look at the way he was raised, what his father did to him and for him, and those are two different things.
We'll get to the both.
But what he did to him and for him has a lot to say about Tiger's ability to play through pain and play through adversity. That there's no golfer, not Jack Nicklaus, not Arnold Palmer, not Ben Crenshaw, none of these guys were trained the way Tiger was trained to play golf.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, sure can.
So it's the 08, it's the Open, it's at Torrey, and Joe DeBach, who's the head pro there, has been there for a long time, and I wanted to get a sense of what that putt was on 18 that he's got to make in order to tie Mediate and in order to get into the playoff the next day, and it's an incredibly tricky putt. First of all, he had to hit the shot that he hit from the fairway. He's about 14 or 15 feet from the hole, and it's right on a ridge line. And DeBach says I've putted that putt 100 times. If you ride the ridge high, it stays high. If you ride the ridge a little bit low or you don't putt it hard enough, it's going to fall off. You have to ride it like it's life dependent on it, and that's exactly what he did. He said, 2 balls outside on the right, commit to the putt, and then make the putt. Now, how many guys, literally, on the PGA Tour, under that kind of pressure, those kind of circumstances, late in the day, bumpy greens, would make that putt? 2 in 10? Maybe?
At most.
At most. 1 in 10, maybe one guy.
And throw in a broken leg and a torn ACL.
Exactly. He's playing basically on one leg for 4 days. And then he's got to play a 5th day.
And a playoff after that, a hole after that.
He's got to play 19 holes on the next day. And, he literally was without an ACL. Jeff did some really good reporting on this, and we're like, he doesn't have an ACL, and he's basically got a stress fracture in his lower leg.
I was amazed, Chris, that the reason I'd say nobody else would make that putt is because no one else would have been playing that day with the physical ailments he had. That's why I think it's easy for us to say no one else would have made that putt, because no one else would have been in that situation but him. And to me, that's what's so compelling about him as a golfer and an athlete is his whole career has been about doing things that no one else has ever done or that no one else would even consider doing. Armen and I say a lot in the book, we talk about his creativity is really what separated him the most. He was a genius in that respect. He could make shots in the dark. He could make shots with a broken leg. He could do things that no one else would fathom.
Yeah, and let's get to, speaking of his ability, and obviously that was major number 14. 97 was major number 1 at the Masters with the 30 on the back 9 on the first day, and away he went. Tell him the story, Armen, and I mentioned this the other day, about his father at a clinic who put 3 balls on the ground, 188 yards. All right, Tiger, I want a fade, I want a draw, and I want a stinger. Go ahead. It's a famous
Well, it's
story.
funny because it's the club I belong to in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Oh, it's Country Club of Fairfield.
Well,
okay.
No, it's Brooklawn.
Oh, it's Brooklawn. That's what it was. Right.
So
okay.
he's there, and it's to this day, it's, everybody still talks about it. It's 1995. He's doing the kind of the dog and pony show circuit that he does with his dad. One of the really interesting parts of the book that no one has ever really reported before is this was part of a fundraising effort by Tiger, really by Earl, to help fund Tiger's amateur expenses. And it's tens of thousands of dollars that are being raised. But he's just off the 16th green at Brooklawn, and it's like, you know, it's Earl's is the ringmaster, and Tiger's kind of is the Tiger. And so Earl would say, hit a draw, or hit a fade to the left, bring it back into the fairway. Tiger did that. Tiger hit a draw along the right side of the trees, bring it back into the fairway. Lands right next to the other ball. Tiger hit a stinger down the middle. He did. This goes on. So one of the members there, who's a good friend of mine, Athen Chris, and he'll be so happy I mentioned his name. He's there, and he said it was like watching magic tricks. You know, literally, you could throw a blanket over those 3 balls, and then at the end of this 45-minute display, he takes a driver and drives the green. It's about 320 yards away at that time. But it doesn't end there. There's a question and answer period, which is very telling with Earl.
And they did this at all these. They do the exhibition, and
then a question and answer.
One of the kids raises his hand. What's Tiger's best score? Earl answers. What's Tiger's favorite club? Earl answers. Last kid raises his hand and goes, yes, Earl says, and the kid goes, does he talk?
That's funny. And I tell you, Richard Williams is the guy who comes closest. Because Richard, and you can bring up LeVar Ball now if you want to, but Richard Williams with Serena and Venus.
Stefano Capriati is another one.
There's another one, but not as good though as these people.
No.
Yes. We're going to go on Earl Woods in a minute. We'll spend some time with that. But as far as the goodness of Earl Woods, he gets the credit because now listen, I mean, he's got great natural ability, but it's because of him that Tiger Woods is Tiger Woods. The work ethic, playing 2 years old, 5 years old, forcing to go to club. I mean, this is his
absolutely.
son, and he brought him to the game. And Earl made sure he played and everything else. So Earl does get the credit from that standpoint.
I think you got to give credit to both parents actually, because if you look at the dedication, Earl gets a lot more attention. If you look back at all the press over the years, Clotilda doesn't get nearly as much press as he does. But there was a point where when Tiger was on the junior circuit, she was the one who drove him to the tournaments, who drove him to his lessons, who then stayed with him and walked the courses with a scorecard. She's a scorekeeper. She kept score, and she remembered numbers. She drove him everywhere. I mean, you're talking about a woman who really gave up her entire life to dedicate it to the one child. She knew it was going to be her only child. She poured everything into him. And I think Armen agrees, we think she's just as important in the equation as Earl. She brings a different thing to the table.
Yeah.
But we interviewed people who were around her when Tiger was a teenager on the junior circuit. And to a man, they would all say, toughest parent you'll ever come across, tougher than Earl in many instances, the disciplinarian, the no-nonsense, and would tell other parents who wanted to, how do they do that with their kid? How do they get him like that? And scouts would say, you don't understand. Like, if you knew what she was really like, that has a lot to do with why Tiger has the mentality he has. It's not about just winning. It's about crushing people. It's about taking your lunch money. I mean, it's showing up at these tournaments and going 120 in a row without losing. It's that kind of mentality. That happened in car rides where she would talk to her son about how to do this.
But Earl brought the passion and the love of the game. Earl loved the game of golf. He practiced, and to his credit, in the day of helicopter parents who can't stay away, and I've seen them at, the IMG Junior World Championships where they're just literally hovering over their kids. Earl would be at the Navy course. Earl would be on one end. Tiger would be on the other end. They both would be practicing, and Earl would say to Joe Groman, who was then the assistant pro, now the head pro at the Navy course, Tiger will come down here when he has a question. He doesn't need me hovering over him. And I think to Earl's credit, he had this savant-like visionary thing going on that really imbued Tiger with a love of the game and a love of practice.
I was just going to bring that up. The practice is amazing. This is a guy that, he'd go out there and a young kid, older, he'd shoot a 63 and he'd be out there the next. How about the story that he plays in the Byron Nelson and he gets on a plane, he texts his guys, I meet you on the 9th hole or the first hole in Germany on Tuesday with the new golf balls. I mean, this is a guy.
That was wild.
He loved, you can't be that good without loving to play, but he's to the extreme.
He was great. I mean, he called up Kel Devlin. He just shot 63 at the Byron Nelson. He could have won it. He goes, if I had my ball, which was then the prototype of the Nike Tour Accuracy ball, and imagine you're Kel Devlin, who's Bruce Devlin's son. He's a scratch player in his own life.
Works at Nike.
Works at Nike. He's the head of global marketing for Nike. He's in his house in Portland, Oregon at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon having a glass of wine, and Tiger goes, if I'd have had my ball, and he goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, I'm going to put the ball in play in Germany on Tuesday at the SAP Open there. And he's like, what do you mean you're going to put the ball in play? I thought we'd stop testing. He goes, no. So he's got to get on a plane from Portland, Oregon. And first of all, he's got to call Rock Ishii, who's the genius behind the construction of the ball, who's in Japan. It's the middle of the night, and Rock can't believe it. So he's got to go to the facility, get 5 dozen balls, go to Narita Airport, fly and find his way to Hamburg, and they show up on the first tee on Tuesday. It's raining. Stevie Williams is there, and he looks at these two guys, and he goes, what the heck are you doing here? And they go, Tiger's going to put the ball in play. And Steve is like, nah, that's not going to happen. And then Tiger
5 minutes there he is.
There he is. And he hits, just to finish the story, puts the ball down. It's perfect for testing the ball because it's raining and it's windy. It's a dogleg left. He hits a bullet down the left side of the fairway with the ball, the Titleist ball he was using at the time. It fades into the right rough. He puts down the Tour Accuracy, hits it on the exact same line as only he could do, and it moves 3 feet into the middle of the fairway. And Stevie Williams goes, after about 5 or 6 holes, I guess we are putting the ball in play.
This is the one we're going to use. And he was dominant too, Jeff. Tell him about how good he was as a young kid. I mean, you're talking about being on the Michael Douglas show and Jimmy Stewart. Oh my God. I mean, you're talking about entering tournaments as an 8-year-old and beating 12-year-olds, hitting the ball 50 yards down the middle of the fairway as a 2. I mean, this is an absolute prodigy who did nothing but practice and hit balls, who had an incredible natural ability, who dominated everybody in Southern California.
Yeah, and if we work backwards on that, Chris, one of my favorite stories in the book, it's a little one, but when he was at the 95 Amateur in Newport, Rhode Island, he and Earl were staying in a house that was on a course in Narragansett. So on a different course, they got a house on there so that Tiger could practice privately all the time while he's there. The guy who owns the house, who vacated for them to stay there, he goes one day to play, and when he goes to get on the course, he sees Tiger practicing putting. Guy goes, plays full round of golf. 3.5 hours later, comes off the course. Tiger hasn't moved. He's still putting. So the guy walks up to him, and it's the first time they've communicated with each other, even though Tiger's staying in his house. And he goes, aren't you going to play? And he goes, I like practicing.
He was amazing.
He's a teenager.
Yeah.
He's a teenager.
He's 18 years old.
And it's a genuine statement, Chris. When he says, I like practicing, this is not Andre Agassi. He loves to practice.
And Agassi hated to practice.
That's right. Tiger loves to practice. He actually enjoyed it. And that habit formed when he was a little kid. It started in the garage off the side of his house where he'd watch his dad play and play and play. Eventually, he started doing that. When he got big enough to go to a course, that's what he liked to do. When he would come out of school, his mom would take him to the course and he would practice. He'd practice till dark. He did it all the time. He did it on weekends. It's why he didn't have a lot of social interaction with other kids. It's why he didn't play other sports. He didn't do a lot of other things, Chris, which is why we made a comparison to the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule. You can talk about Bill Gates. You can talk about Paul McCartney and John Lennon and people who were great in their early 20s. They logged their 10,000 hours. Tiger had his 10,000 hours when he was an adolescent.
It's incredible. I mean, you hit it right in the head, and he did. And as a result, the other side of that we're going to get to here in a minute, because when you practice that much, you're going to lose some things on the other end, which may have led to.
Well, you lose your childhood. You do. Yeah. That's what happens.
You can't be that good and not lose your childhood.
I don't think so.
Although Federer didn't lose his childhood when you get right down to it, which is interesting.
Well, with Tiger, though, he just didn't have a lot of outside activities. He would go to the course and practice. He would come home. He basically was surrounded by his parents from the time that he was born, and he had a few nerdy friends that were all the same kind of mind. You know, he had 3 friends, but he didn't play other sports. He never played, as much as he likes to say he did, he never played a team sport. So he lived this very protective life, socially awkward life, until literally he got to high school and he became this kind of unknown star with, and it's a wonderful story.
It's a weird story too, because I was so fascinated, Chris, by here's a guy that people in New York that cover sports knew who Tiger Woods was when he was a freshman in high school. But when he shows up at high school, no one at high school knows who he is. Who's that guy? By his sophomore year, he's referred to as the golf guy. He's a nerd. People think he's an oddball because he's not a football player and he's not a basketball player and he doesn't hang out with cheerleaders. But he's one of the best high school athletes in the United States of America.
And they didn't know him in Anaheim, but they knew him in New York City.
That's right.
Exactly.
His first girlfriend that he meets when he's a sophomore,
nice kid too. Nice kid.
Great.
Dina Gravel.
Great
nice
girl
kid.
from a great family. But she was really popular in high school. Everyone knew who she was. Nobody knew who he was. And when she first discovered that he was famous was when she went to his house one day to meet his parents. And there's first of all, there's trophies everywhere, but there's also, he's on the cover of magazines and his dad's pulling out videos of him being on the Mike Douglas show and stuff. And she's like, you were in People magazine?
Yeah.
He's never told her about any of this stuff. He's never talked about it. And her jaw's dropping. She's starting to think, who is this guy that I'm dating?
That's how good he was.
And his teachers, you know, we actually spoke to his kindergarten teacher and his first grade teacher. And there were times, and again, this is revisionistic history by Earl Woods, when he would say, you know, if my son wanted to be a mailman in Memphis, Tennessee, I would have allowed him to be a mailman. That's just not true.
No way.
I mean, he would go to these parent-teacher conferences, and the teachers didn't take him long to figure out the family dynamic was a little different. And they would say things like, because Tiger would come to them and say, would you ask my parents if it's okay if I could play soccer or if I could play other sports with my friends? And Earl came in and laid down the law right away. My son's not going to be playing other sports.
Golf is it.
Golf is it.
Armen Keteyian and Jeff Benedict moving along well. 20 after the hour with Tiger Woods. We're back right after.